Hey, everyone, and welcome to the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast, the best place in the entire world, including all of Canada, to learn how to build new thoughts, new actions, and new results. I'm your host, John Acuff, and today I'm joined by Scott Jeffrey Miller. Who's that? I'm so glad you asked. Capping a 25-year career, that's a quarter century, as the kids say, where he served as a chief marketing officer and executive vice president of business development, Scott Jeffrey Miller currently serves as FranklinCovey's senior advisor on thought leadership, leading the strategy and development of the firm's speakers bureau, as well as the publication of podcasts, webcasts, and best-selling books. FranklinCovey, by the way, is the super team of Benjamin Franklin and Stephen Covey. That's like when LeBron played with Dwayne Wade. That's a pretty good team. Scott also hosts On Leadership with Scott Miller, the world's largest and fastest growing leadership podcast, reaching more than 6 million people weekly. That is pretty close to my numbers right now. For All It Takes Is a Goal. We're like at 5.9-ish. We're on the edge. In addition, Scott authors a leadership column for Inc.com and is the best-selling author of the Mess to Success series. I can't wait for you to hear this interview. It's super fun. Scott is a super interesting guy. But first, a quick message from the sponsor of today's podcast. You've heard me say it before. Goals are not easy, but they are simple. Personal goals are hard enough. But if you're leading a team, that's even harder. Good luck keeping everyone on track and focused. Did you know that 92% of people don't achieve their goals? 92%, according to our University of Scranton study. That means only 8% of people actually finish what they start. The good news? There's some hope. And I'm excited to share it with you today. You've got to check out Leader. It's the first ever people development software that helps you and your team set clear goals and track progress over time. It's called Leader. Leadr. With Leader, you can simplify goals for your team. You can add collaborators across the organization. You can include clear action items and updates throughout the week, all in one easy-to-use platform. Imagine what your team could accomplish if every employee was engaged and growing with clear goals and consistent development at every level. Contact Leader to set up a custom demo for your team today at leadr.com. That's leadr.com. More than 600 organizations are already using Leader to track goals and develop their teams. And use promo code Acuff, that's ACUFF, for 20% off when you book a demo at leader.com. All right, let's jump into today's interview with Scott Miller. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today. I can't wait. I've been on your podcast before. It's a real honor to host you on mine.
John Acuff, thank you, man, for the spotlight and the platform. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'd like to jump in with some hard-hitting questions right away. So number one, what are your thoughts on the Brussels Griffin Breeda dog? Where do you land?
What I didn't know is that these dogs are actually bred to ferret out rats and mice in horse stalls. And if I had known that, I would have bought 2 of them because they're the busiest body dogs ever of mankind. So as you know, we've had 2 of these. One was named Oliver, who passed away with our help gently about 4 months ago, very traumatic. And we have now not replaced him, but added to our family a new Brussels Griffon called Wilson, who is as interesting and interested in life as Oliver was. So.
But do you guys live in a horse stall? Because that would make complete, if you were in a horse stall, I could see that being perfect. But I've never been to your house. So is it a horse stall?
We do live in Utah, so it's possible. No, we're downtown Salt Lake, not Harley. But my wife, Stephanie, just loves this breed of dog. For those of you who are wondering what the heck, this is the breed of dog that Jack Nicholson put down the trash chute in the famous movie As Good As It Gets. And these dogs look like Civil War generals, right? But they're cute.
Yeah, they look like a Civil War general / Ewok. No one's ever compared those 2 items in life, and you are right. But I bring that up because you put that's on the homepage of your website, which I think is so indicative of how fun you are. Right out of the gate, I was like, oh, and I appreciate you didn't correct how I said Griffin. You said it right when you said Griffon. Like, it's a fancy breed when it comes to...
It's the sophistication in me, John, right? I went to Cotillion.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know. Griffin. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, second question. How many pairs of glasses do you own?
Every color they make, so probably 60.
Okay,
Here's the key. I just buy the frames, and then I have 3 pair of lenses, and they're all the same frame. So I just pop the lenses in and out. They're all the same size glass. It's just so glasses cost $40. The lenses are like 300. So I get the benefit of 70 pair, but only the cost of 3 sets of lenses.
That is brilliant. And it's good that I think people were probably going to be like, this guy owns $200,000 worth of glasses.
Not hardly.
That the interview better be about, being a hoarder. That is amazing. It's part of your signature look. It's part of what makes you so fun. I also think you're a bit of a book writing machine. I would apply the word prolific to you. I got a big box of your books just the other day, which I was so thrilled to get. I have one on my desk right now. The most recent Master Mentors. There's a new one coming out in the fall. There's one coming out in 2023 about communication that we'll talk a little about.
Hey, stop there, John. I have a great idea. Let's get you back on our podcast, and maybe we would feature you in Master Mentors Volume 3 with Mel Robbins and James Clear and Deepak Chopra. Let's do that.
I'm in. I'm 100% in.
Thank you, sir.
Count me in. What would you say has helped you push through the barrier of not writing a book? Because it's way easier to not write a book than it is to write a book. And a lot of people have that goal. According to New York Times, 81% of Americans want to write a book. According to Amazon statistics, less than 1% do every year. What's helped you push through that goal? The name of the podcast is All It Takes Is a Goal. So I'll definitely be nerding out with you on some goal questions.
A mutual colleague and friend of ours, Rachel Hollis, once told me on her podcast that most people don't fear failure. They fear having other people see them fail. And that kind of had a profound impact on me. I actually don't mind failing because I think for me, everything is a lesson in life. I honestly believe that pragmatically. So I think everything is an iteration. I like turning nothing into something. I like producing things. And not everybody's going to love my work. Obviously there's 7.8 billion people in the world. And last time I checked, my royalty statement didn't reflect that. So some people don't like what I read. But I found my niche. I found people who I think I have something to value to add. So I write to them. I don't try to write to everyone. I'm very clear about who my target market is. So what I do is I'm a visual learner. I take my books and I actually write them up on my wall. Post-it notes and folders and notes, and I move them all around. And I get a visual spatial orientation for how they fit together. What's a thought versus a paragraph? What's a paragraph versus a chapter? And I move it all around. And I find that when I teach that concept to a lot of potential authors, get your ideas out of your head, get them visually on a table, on a wall, on the floor, whatever it is. It helps you make sense of it. I'm a strong believer that most of us are visual learners.
I love that in part because I have my next book on the wall right there. I'm showing you with the video, and I have huge Post-it notes that I do the same exact process.
I own your calendar, by the way.
Oh, great!
When I saw your calendar for sale a couple of years ago, I bought one. And it's on my wall at my house. You have a great calendar that really helped me to visualize what my strategic plan was with my books, my podcast, my radio programs, things like that. You create some great tools to help people.
I appreciate that. How long would you, if you had to guesstimate, and you obviously no exact number, about how long does it take you to write a book? Have you ever thought of
about 3 months? Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed Jen Sincero. You Are a Badass author.
Oh yeah,
phenomenal interview. And she writes a book in about 2 weeks. She takes like 9 months off, and she hikes and she thinks and she exercises, comes home, and she writes her books in 2 weeks. It's amazing, just nonstop. I know. And then she's done for like another year. For me, I'm a very disciplined person. I wake up at 4 o'clock every morning, 7 days a week. And I write my ink column on my blog from about 4 to 5. And I write my books from about 5 to 6:30 when my boys wake up. Like you, I'm a dad of 3 boys. So it takes me between 3 and 4 months to write a book, recognizing that I tend to write books and take all my chapters to the 1 yard line, kind of a football metaphor.
Yep.
And then I have an editor kind of, run it over or kick it over or run it back for me. So I'd say about 3 to 4 months per book. And my books are not good to great. They're not built to last. It's not War and Peace. My books are easy and breezy and pithy, somewhat like yours. Yep. But it works for my audience.
I love that. How long have you been on that schedule? Were you a goal guy in high school? Like you were an Eagle Scout and you were getting up early?
Yeah. Not an Eagle Scout, but I was student body president of my high school. And in high school, I got up in the mornings early and I worked at a bakery washing pans, washing like 6-foot stacks of bakery pans
Before
every morning.
school.
Before school. And then I would like change, put on my penny loafers, my khakis, my Ralph Lauren shirt, take my motor scooter and do the announcements at 7:50 in the morning. And I was a very early riser. And then of course, all through college. So I've always been an early riser. I don't love getting up at 4 a.m. I'm not sick. But I find that what I've learned from Dan Pink is that all of us have this circadian rhythm, right? We have our peak and our trough and our recovery. And Dan Pink didn't invent this idea, but he popularized it in his book, When, about timing. And I know that my peak is 4 a.m. to about 11 a.m. every day. And then I move into a trough till about 1 o'clock or so. I don't go asleep. I just, it's not my high energy. I have a bit of a rebound till about 5. And I'm in bed every night at 9:30. I'm asleep by 9:45 because I need 7 hours and I get up at 4.
Yeah. So you're doing that 7 days a week. There's no like, and then on Saturday, I sleep till 8.
No.
Yeah. Because you're in a rhythm. You're in a zone.
And I'm writing, 2 to 3 books a year and columns and blogs. And like you, I'm a parent and a spouse and I got snow to shovel and, people to help out and people ask me to help them. So, I mean, listen, did I sleep till 5 o'clock 2 days ago? Of course. Has there been a Saturday where I woke up at, 6 o'clock? No. But I would be willing to. I just, I'm in a rhythm and I wake up now naturally that way.
Do you see that consistently? Or what are some things you see consistently in the people you interview? Because I think that comes through in Master Mentors. But I think you've got part of what's great about your life is you've got a front row seat to some of the smartest people in the world. And you can already hear that in some of your answers. So what are some things that you see consistently among high performers?
I love that you asked this question, John. I was asked this question on a podcast a few months ago, and the host did not like my answer. In fact, he so disliked it, he pushed it about 20 minutes on me. But I'm going to repeat the same answer. The first is the things that I see about all these amazing guests, whether they're Jack Canfield or John Gray or, Doris Kearns Goodwin or whoever it is, General McChrystal, Seth Godin, Dan Pink, Liz Wiseman, you name it. They all have an abundance mentality. Dave Hollis, they all want to help other people, not self-servingly. They truly want to help other people, to help them learn from their own lessons, to be vulnerable. They all have an abundance mindset versus a scarce mindset. They believe that if I help you, that doesn't mean there's less for me. It means there's more for me in life. That's the first thing. The second is they're just hard workers. And this is the answer I gave to the podcast host who did not like it. There's a reason why John Maxwell is doing, 10 speeches and writing 4 books a month and podcast. I mean, John Maxwell has more money than God. He does not need to give one more podcast interview or sell one more book, right? But the guy has an abundance mentality and he feels like he has a mission, a calling to help and serve and learn and to share. And the guy did not like my answer. He said, so you're telling me that the key to my dad's success was to just sell more vegetables out of his truck? That he worked 40 years? And I said, listen, I never met your dad. I said, I don't know if your dad was selling the right vegetables or had the right truck or the right corn or the right marketing or the right customers. I don't know. But what I'm telling you is John Gray and Jack Canfield, they don't need to do anymore, but they do because they love and they want to serve. And they believe they have more to offer and more to learn. And that is the red thread between all of our guests is they have an indefatigable work ethic and they have an abundance mentality. And I still think there's a place for both of those in 2022 that can set you apart from your competition.
And I think that what's interesting is as some bars get lower, one of the things I like to say is goals are hard because Netflix is easy. Like goals are hard because Amazon Prime is easy. Sometimes with our modern distractions, our distraction technology is scaled faster than our ability to focus. And as that happens, it's easier and easier to not write a book. It's easier and easier to not do the things.
There's no such thing as overnight success. Now, there is overnight fame, and it's often ill-gotten or fleeting. Yeah. But you ask Seth Godin where he started. Most people don't know. He was like this sort of awkward Jewish boy from New York City who was like writing gaming articles. He was like a gamer. He was writing a gaming magazine, right? Look at him now. Ask Rachel Hollis how many people bought Party Girl, or, her first 5 books. No one bought them. And then, of course, Girl Wash Your Face, right? And you see this in common across people that, they spent 20 years, like me, 30 years behind the scenes, working and building and learning and making mistakes, starting and finishing. And then all that knowledge came together, all that experience. That's a commonality. Matthew McConaughey, right? Look at how many movies he auditioned for you never saw. Ryan Serhant, the famous, star of $1 Million Listings on Bravo, now a huge, he started as a hand model, right? He couldn't even afford like an apartment in New York City.
Just didn't even have the face, just hands.
That's it, just the hands. Handsome
just
guy.
Just limbs. He was a limb model. I mean, he's very handsome. That tells you how cutthroat modeling is.
I know.
I mean, he's not disfigured in the face. He's got a very handsome face, I'd like to say. But apparently his hands, super sexy. That is so funny. Okay, so I love the abundance mentality. I love the work ethic because I still haven't found a shortcut to writing a book. I still have to write a lot. I still have to sit down a lot. I still have to do a lot of the work. And the John Maxwell thing's interesting because I saw Dolly Parton do a concert. I was doing an event and she was on the event and she did a 75-minute concert that started at 10 p.m. And it was full, like it was 22-year-old Dolly strength. Like she was amazing. And I think you're right. So how do people develop a mission that keeps them going past the temporary goals of, okay, if I make this certain amount of money, because then you make the money and you have nowhere to go, or then you accomplish the thing. How do you stay in motion for a goal that's bigger than just a season of your life?
This may sound trite, but my 25 years in the FranklinCovey company, where I served as the chief marketing officer for a decade. Obviously, our company was founded by Dr. Stephen R. Covey, the author of many books, including The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Dr. Covey talked about your personal mission statement. In fact, that's the most trafficked page on FranklinCovey's website is missionstatementbuilder.com. And Dr. Covey, who's passed now, once gave a speech, John, at our annual conference. He talked about the power of having a mission statement. Now, I was back in my 30s. John, I was married when I was 41. So if you were asking a 35-year-old Scott Miller, what was your mission in life? I would have said, I don't know, more champagne, more trips to Italy, more tennis. I have no idea. I'm a single guy in my 30s. But then our other founder, Hiram Smith, who was really kind of the modern father of time management, invented the Franklin Planner and the Franklin planning process. He talked about the power of knowing your values. And that hit me, knowing your values. Here I am, 35 years old, and I don't know my values. So I went home to my loft in Chicago, and for over several days, I wrote out my values. PhilPal, P-H-I-L-P-A-L, purpose, health, integrity, loyalty, positivity, abundance, and learning. PhilPal. And I wrote out my values, and now those guide my entire life. Every decision I make, whether I am excited or fatigued, whether I am at the front or the end, whether I'm starting or finishing, I connect back to my values, and they haven't changed. By the way, I didn't create my values so that you would like them. I don't give a crap what you think about my values. They're my values. Yeah. But I know them, and they're not convenient, they're not politically expedient. And everything I do and say yes to or say no to is now aligned with my personal values. But that was half of it. Then I came to realize that so many people, too many people, were taking their careers accidentally, serendipitously in directions, $1 more an hour here, or 1% more commission there, or beer on tap on Thursdays. And they were just kind of bouncing around, whether it was entrepreneurial ventures or it was corporate careers or as owners, they weren't deliberate enough. And so I started to realize, in addition to a set of personal values, John, you've got to have a set of professional values. And they're often different. And you got to write out both of them because sometimes they are in conflict. And you can't know if they're in conflict if you don't write them down and look at them and know when might you want to lean one way or the other. So I would argue, I think it's very liberating to have articulated out your personal and professional values in their separate lists and to know when are they in sync? When are they not? When should you double down? When should you perhaps drop one and add another one in? It's been a powerful lesson for me.
I think that's fascinating. I definitely have some follow-up questions with that. What I think part of the power of that to me is you don't have to approach every situation like it's the first time you've approached it. When you have a value, it creates a system almost where you go. So one of my professional values is I don't do new podcasts. When somebody says, I'm starting a brand new podcast, I'd like you to be episode 1 or 2. I say, no, let's talk in a year, because they're probably going to quit. They definitely have the smallest audience, and they're not good at podcasting yet. Now, if it's a friend or a connection or something I'm trying to really super serve, I'll do the podcast. But for the most part, I've just said, wow, I've done that a number of times, and I felt like it wasn't a valuable use of my time. It's not that I'll say no forever, but and that little thing has saved me so many awkward conversations of, oh, should I do this? And hemming and hawing. If I'm listening to this, and the values thing just blew my mind. When you say you went back to your apartment or loft in Chicago, did you write down 50 and narrow? Did you just give yourself freedom and then kind of winnowed?
Delighted you asked that as well. I made a commitment to myself that, unlike every other personality test or survey or questionnaire or strengths finder or Myers-Briggs, I wasn't going to try to answer the questions on how I thought I should answer them. Mm-hmm. I wasn't trying to get a good score. I wasn't trying to impress John Acuff at a cocktail party. I said, I'm going to write down what I believe, what is true about me, what accurately represents what I think I want to be in life. And so I wrote down some things, and I thought, you can't have 12 values. How would you possibly live in alignment with those? Maybe you can. Probably 3 or 4 is probably more likely, but I came up with 7 because I thought they were really valuable. They represented things I was passionate about, areas I struggled with, whether it was character or competence or, parts of my life that I wasn't proud of. There's not many of those, but there's a few. We all have them. And I winnowed them down to 7, and then just serendipitously, I forced them into an acronym so that I would memorize them. PAL isn't even a word. But here I am, 18 years later, and I can tell you exactly what they are in order. Purpose is 1, which is why I'm Catholic, and my wife and I are raising our 3 sons in that faith. My wife is not of that faith. But for us, Sunday is all about that. And we organize and note. We don't have sleepovers on Saturday night, and we don't go skiing on Sunday morning, and we don't have basketball teams that practice. Now, we recreate on Sundays and we do fun things, but serving our purpose is unnegotiable for us. Mm-hmm. Health, integrity, loyalty, positivity, abundance, and learning. And so there was a broader category, but my boys can tell you their dad's values. And when they start moaning on Saturday night, when we're writing out our tithing checks or we're talking about whether they're going to be ultra serving tomorrow or not, I say, would you like a lesson in PAL? And they all groan and they go back to their rooms.
Yeah, that is so good. Okay, so what else do you say no to? Because you're very deliberate with your yes, but I think you're very deliberate with your no. What are some things that you go, you know what? Here, you just said Sunday's not a negotiable for you. So what are some, whether it's an opportunity that you said, you know what? Those are the kind of things I say no to in order that I can say yes to all these things that matter.
John, this is a struggle for me. So I think your audience will identify with this. Listen, some people call me ferocious. I was an officer in a public company for a long time, 100 quarters of SEC investor growth, 100 quarters, right? I know how to meet goals. I know how to say no, but it's difficult for me right now because abundance is one of my values. And I'm very grateful for everyone like you and others that have poured into me and endorsed my books and come to my podcast. So I feel a level of, you called it super service. I love that word, that it was not lost on me, super service. I have difficulty saying no because, like everyone, I want to be wanted. I want to be validated. And I was just talking earlier today. I write a column for Inc. magazine. Up until recently, I hosted a radio program for iHeartRadio. I have 4 books out there. I have 3 books launching next year. I host the world's largest weekly leadership podcast. I launched a new podcast called C-Suite Conversation with Scott Miller. I have a career coaching program. I had probably 4 keynote inquiries this week. I have another person ask me to write a book. Another person asked me to write a book. It's insane. We know you cannot do 14 things and do equality. But I know something about me, and I don't know why. Ask my therapist, don't have one, need one. Why do I feel the need to be loved by so many people? Why do I feel the need to do B+ quality work when I could do 2 things, like Jim Collins, Good to Great, Built to Last. He writes 1 book every 6 years. You don't hear from him for 2 years. He says no to $100,000 a day, every day for a year. He does not make $6 million this year because he says no to all his keynotes, and he goes and he writes a blockbuster. He is, ask him that question. I have not learned that yet. What I know is I crave validation too much right now. And maybe because I wasn't getting it in my corporate job, which is why I've retired in good standing from FranklinCovey, and I'm still, an ambassador for the firm and the brand, love them dearly. But I do struggle with this. I struggle a lot with this. A, because I have a service mentality. I like to give back to people. See, I'll do the first podcast because I know the first podcast is always the most listened to because everybody starts with one. Even if it fails, I'll do the first one. I'm just picking up Jon Acuff's scraps, everybody.
You'll do the first one. Would you do the third one?
Well, there often isn't a third one, is there?
Yeah, exactly. You're picking up Jon Acuff's scraps. Please, you're playing tennis with Deepak Chopra. I don't want to hear it.
Can I tell you something, people? Listen to me. Finish is one of my favorite books. If you follow my podcast on Leadership with Scott Miller, it's on video, and all of Jon Acuff's books are on my wall. I highly recommend you buying and reading the book Finish. It haunts me like frickin' Jiminy Cricket, people.
I can see two of my books behind you right now. You've got Finish and soundtracks right next to each other. That's so funny. Well, I love that. I love the honesty of that. Yeah, I have the same thing. I'm not good at saying no. I'm trying to get better at that. I do see a therapist and love it. I've seen therapists for years. It's been instructive and helpful. And I feel like I'm able to workshop things. I think that people change often one of two ways, by joy or by a crisis. And I'd rather change by joy. So when I feel like there's a new joy I want to try, I try to, plug into that. We talked a little about the Master Mentors book. Who are some of your mentors? So people that maybe it's a mastermind group, maybe it's, a friend that you get coffee with that's 20 years ahead of you, or who in your regular life, Scott's regular life, are your mentors?
Many people. Seth Godin has been a massive mentor in my life for decades. He's an iconoclast, right? I mean, he's very clear on saying no. He says no to everything. I have to ask him 8 times. Bob Dole was a big mentor of mine. George H.W. Bush. I served on Vice President George Bush and Senator Quayle long before you were born, John. I worked on their campaign back in the 80s, and President George H.W. Bush was a big mentor of mine. Stephen Covey was a mentor. But let me tell you, I'll answer your question a little bit differently this way. I'm actually writing a book on mentoring for HarperCollins right now, how to be a mentor. And I don't think you have to know your mentors. I think this is a misnomer that the mentor is the CFO on the 6th floor, or your mentor is the lawyer down the street. Most of my mentors don't know I exist. I've been to their conference. I listened to their radio program. I've read their books. They have no idea I'm alive. Long before Jon Acuff was conceived, there was a man who really established talk radio called Bruce Williams. And he was a businessman back in the 70s and 80s that had a nighttime television show. Back when Sally Jesse Raphael was a radio host. And I used to listen to Bruce Williams every night from 6 to 9 p.m. Nerd alert, as a junior high school student. And he was an entrepreneur and a city council member and a lawyer. And people would ask questions about how to buy a mortgage and how to buy a home and how to launch a business, and kind of like, a business version of Dave Ramsey 40 years ago. He's a huge mentor of mine. He passed about a decade ago. I never met him. Doesn't know I'm alive. Bruce Williams was my mentor for 10 years every night from 6 to 9 p.m. on talk radio. So I have lots of mentors that I ski with and I eat with and I lunch with, and I reciprocally mentor them. I love it when Seth Godin calls me and says, hey, talk to TED Talk. They need some ideas around how to launch a corporate side of their business, right? And no bigger honor, but don't limit yourself by identifying people as mentors just because you don't know them or they say no or you can't find them.
I think that's great feedback. I would say Stephen Pressfield, we've emailed, but we've never hung out, and he's definitely been a mentor to me. And Bruce Williams spoke to you probably more than most people in your life. If you're listening to 3 hours. So I'm curious, back to childhood, were your parents goal-oriented? Did you come out of the womb with a checklist and you're like, let's go. Get me out of this hospital. I got some things to do. How did you fall into that?
I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, but I'm born and raised in Orlando, Florida, raised in a very kind of prototypical Caucasian middle-class family in the 70s. My father worked a career job for 32 years. My mom was a full-time homemaker, parent to my mother, to my brother and I. I was not raised in wealth. I was not raised with, neither of my parents went to college. They were hard workers. And fine people. They still live in the same house that they got married in 58 years ago. John, going to see them tomorrow, actually, going to Orlando tomorrow to
Awesome.
check on mom and dad, make sure they're okay. I wasn't raised that way. I was raised with good old-fashioned values. Admit your mistakes, hard work, an abundance mentality. Can I share a short story with you?
I'd love that. I'd love that.
I think the reason why I set goals in life was a life of service. My grandmother, my dad's mother, in Minnesota, her husband died when her twin sons were 10. My dad was 10, and his dad died of cancer. She was widowed with 2 twin boys that were 10. 5 years later, my father's twin brother caught polio back in the 50s and spent decades in an iron lung, and eventually he succumbed. My father was Catholic. My father's mother was Catholic. And the Knights of Columbus, which you may have heard of, is a fairly well-known Catholic service organization. The Knights of Columbus came by my grandmother's home, and they offered to pay for the iron lung for my dad's twin. Now, she was a widow working as a lunch lady in the local high school cafeteria. I'm getting emotional because this is a powerful story. And she said, no, I can afford it. Go next door. The Lutherans can't afford it. Now, if you know anything about Minnesota in the 50s, the Lutherans and the Catholics walked on separate sidewalks to school. And my grandmother was a tough German lady who was widowed. She had a son who was in an iron lung dying from polio. And she said, go next door. They can't afford it. My grandmother could not afford it. She somehow scraped the money together. And I heard this story when I was about 15 years old. She used to come and visit us in Florida. I remember the bed I was sitting on when my grandmother told me this story, like with German humility, and it changed my life. And I just thought, my life needs to be about that. I have goals. I want a nice car. I want a cabin in the woods, which I don't have. I want to send my kids to good schools. At the same time, I want to not take more than my share. I want to give back more than I take. And so that has had an impact on my work ethic, on my constant need to live my life, not through I have to or I ought to, but I get to. And Nick Vujicic is a good friend of mine. I know you know who Nick Vujicic is. He's the, the gentleman who's born with no limbs and an amazing force in my life, been in my homes many times. And whenever I see Nick, it just eviscerates my issues. He has no arms and no legs. And he's a force to be reckoned with. Whenever I'm feeling down or having a pity party or not finishing something, dreading taking out the garbage cans at night, I think I get to take the garbage cans out. Nick Vujicic cannot take out the garbage cans. And so it's a long story to say, thank you, Agnes Miller, and thank you, Nick Vujicic, for the impact you've had on my life every day to say, not I have to, not I ought to, but rather I get to. I get to get up at 4 and write. I get to have a high courage conversation with a colleague. I get to terminate someone because it's not working out for them or for me. I get to shovel the yard because I actually have 2 arms. That's kind of where I get my energy and motivation.
That's powerful.
That was a crazy train.
No. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. I assumed you don't get to tell that story on every podcast, so I'm honored that you told it to me.
I don't, only with my friends.
What are the fears that you face when you think about how much you have going on? You listed out, you did like a laundry list of like, here's the 12. You're obviously not stopping or paralyzed or worried. It doesn't seem like you're outwardly worried about that. How do you push through some of those fears? Is it that you go, you know what, John? I do today. Like the general manager of the Washington Nationals, Dan Pink, I just interviewed him the other day. It's funny you mentioned him, said, go 1-0 today. 1-0. That's what I'm doing. Today I'm going 1-0. What do you do when you bump into some fears? Because I think it'll be easy for people to listen to this podcast and go, this guy's a machine. He's getting up at 4 a.m. Like he doesn't have a fear in the world or a concern. But when you bump into them, what do you do in response?
Was it Brian Tracy that wrote the book, Eat the Frog? Is that Brian Tracy?
Yep.
Yeah. And so, the big idea there is, you kind of do the hard stuff first. You take on the hard stuff. And I try to live my life. I recognize that issues neglected become bigger and haunting issues. They never go away. No. Tough conversations with your neighbor, issues with your mother-in-law.
Yes.
Whatever it is, the stuff does not go away. It does not shrink. You've got to tackle it. I have a lot of high courage conversations with people I make promises to. I like to make and keep commitments. Part of my reputation is both making and keeping commitments.
Is that integrity? Is that the I in Phil Powell?
There you go. I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm sure it is, right? Look at you. Remember my acronym.
Right?
Thank
I'm
you, sir.
listening. Reflective
sir.
listening. That's
Thank
what
you,
I did.
sir.
It's counseling.
One of the attributes of a trusted person is they do what they say they're going to do, including if they have to deprive themselves from some pleasure, if they have to work harder in the evening. By the way, I have a balanced life. I have 3 boys that I'm raising to be gentlemen with my wife. I serve in my faith community. I have a marriage that my boys are trying to destroy every day. I swear their plot is to end my marriage. I have 3 sons that are 7, 9, and 11. And to my wife's horror, they have my personality. We're convinced they plot every night in the attic. How do we kill their marriage today? So
funny.
it's so true, right? We have to regird every morning to make sure they don't succeed.
Yeah, we're on the same team here. Let's go. We're link
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bring it on, kids.
Yeah.
We're stronger than
good.
you. I like to make and keep commitments. I'm mindful of when I overcommit. And if I do, I raise a red flag. I call my editor and say, I got to tell you the truth. I'm going to talk straight with you. I'm going to be 6 days late. And here's what happened. And so I find that transparency and vulnerability is such a lubricant for trust, right? Is that they know where I am. I'm very clear on it. So I probably should make less commitments, but I am uber responsible on keeping commitments.
And adjusting when you can't and following up quickly.
And telling the truth, not concocting
telling the
some
truth.
cover story, calling them up and saying, you know what? I did this and I spent too many days in California and I only wrote 4 chapters versus 14 because my son was having an issue, whatever the story is, right? And I just tell the truth. Or I was having an issue.
Yeah, I think I could talk to you for hours, and hopefully when I'm in Salt Lake at some point, I'll be able to do exactly that in person. I only have 4 questions left. You've said high courage conversations a couple of times. I think that one of your strengths is reframing things. So a lot of people would say conflict conversation, terrible conversation, hard conversation, and you say a high courage conversation. Are there other examples in your leadership, in your life, where you reframe something? And it's often by words.
Well, that's the definition of empathy. That's the very definition of having a leadership competency, which is being an empathic listener, is listening to someone and perhaps even reframing it in words that work with your vernacular, but they restate their point. I tell you, John, I think I spent my 30-year career in leadership development and as a leader and a writer and a speaker. I think the most important leadership competency of every leader, whether you are leading one person in your side hustle or 8 people in your startup or 800 people in your company, it's giving people feedback on their blind spots. This is your biggest gift to your people, is having high courage conversations with them about their blind spots. Now, you got to balance that courage with diplomacy and consideration. I tend to err on the side of courage, and sometimes I have a deficit of diplomacy. I have to be mindful of that. I want to leave people better off than when I found them. But I also want to give them the gift of, I'm seeing some things in your life that perhaps you're not aware of that you perhaps could work on or think about. So I do a lot of reframing, not to reframe my intent, but to make sure I say it in a way that they can hear it in a non-defensive manner. Because no one wants to hear that their dress code isn't up to par. No one wants to hear that their breath doesn't smell good. No one wants to hear that they're not collaborative or they're too defensive. So you've got to build trust with people. So you create the conditions to give them feedback. But reframing, I think, is a responsible leadership skill as long as your intent is pure. Because we all have nefarious intent. Even the best among us have some hidden agendas. So don't reframe it to manipulate. Don't reframe it to, posture or position. Reframe it to make sure that it's said in a way that both of you hear and feel the same thing.
I love that. Next question. You've got a book coming out, Communication Mess to Influence Success, comes out in June of 2023. As a public speaker, I love that topic. I geek out about that topic. What do you think are the elements that make for a good speech?
For a good speech?
Good speech.
Well, first, no PowerPoint. Put down the keynote and put down the PowerPoint. And stop having your speech be dependent on visuals. There's a time and a place. But I think what makes a great speech is you ask yourself, What do I want them to know and feel and do? Who are they? What are their needs? What do they need to get out of this? And can I tell a story? Can I bring a story to life with my cadence, my voice, my rate, my tone, my pitch, my pacing? Can I show some vulnerability? Here's a good example, John. I'm a stutterer. I have a lifelong debilitating stutter. I've had braces 4 times, headgear. I'm in Invisalign, like literally right now. I have 2 speech therapists. I've been a stutterer my whole life. There are 45 words I cannot say in public, and it doubles or triples in the wintertime. Comes out like, and so there's a time and a place when I might share that, not gratuitously. But if I'm talking about vulnerability or a topic that's related to the audience, then I'll get very tender and talk about some of my own issues. I think what makes a great speech is deciding what is your story. Can you paint a vision of both what is and what could be? Can you transfer your confidence to them? You know, Donald Miller is a good friend of both of ours. You know, he talks about how it's so important that your client, your customer, your participants see themselves in your message. They see their journey, their struggle, their triumph in your speech. And then you decide, is there some visual that could support that? A picture, a slide, maybe 2 slides. I think most people prepare their speeches with a deck of white paper and start sketching out all their slides. That is the last thing you should do. You should first decide, what do I want to communicate? And are there any visuals or words that are necessary to make that memorable? The long answer, I'm sorry.
No. I that could be its own entire
book
that comes out June of 2023. Second to last question, what 4 books would you put on your Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, absolutely. This is easy for me. My favorite book of all time is Zoom, Zoom. It's written by, I think, a Romanian cartoonist named Istvan Biani. It has no words in it, but it's the most powerful book you've ever not read.
I've never even heard of it.
You've got to buy it. It's up on my wall somewhere. It's called Zoom, and it's all about perspective. It's all about suspending judgment and understanding that you may not have the full picture. You may not have all the facts. There may be more information you're not aware of. Zoom is number 1. Another book written by a woman named Anna Quinlan, A Short Guide to a Happy Life. It's extraordinary. A Short Guide to a Happy Life. I think Liz Wiseman wrote the best leadership book of all time. It's called Multipliers. If you are a leader of people, you must buy Liz Wiseman's book, Multipliers. The whole concept is, as leaders, all of us are both multiplying and accidentally diminishing people at the same time. You aren't either a multiplier or you're a diminisher. We're doing both. And that her research shows there are 9 types of accidental diminishing tendencies. The idea fountain, the pace setter, the optimist, the perfectionist, the rescuer. You get the point. And the more that you can identify when you are doing that to your people accidentally, what does it look like, feel like, then you can minimize that and create more multiplying moments to be not the genius, but rather the genius maker of others.
That's perfect. Those 3 have not been mentioned yet.
There you go. I got more, but that's good. That's good.
All right. You got a wall behind you. We'll take a photo after because I'm going to post this. Last question. It's an easy one. Or second to last question. What 3 best mountains to ski in Salt Lake City, starting with best to third?
Depends on what you want. For me, it's Deer Valley. You have to mortgage your home to buy a ticket, but it is luxurious. There are no snowboarders.
Beautiful groomers.
It's just the groomers. So Deer Valley is one. I think Solitude is an unknown mountain. It is stunning. It's on the Wasatch side. It's on the Salt Lake City side, but Solitude is just beautiful. Majesty of the trees and the sky. I love Solitude. I'll tell you, Sundance is a hidden gem, right? The resort formerly owned by Robert Redford. It's not a very competitive mountain, but just the beauty of the cabins and the runs and and just Sundance is gorgeous. So I'd say Deer Valley, Solitude, and then Sundance.
I'm surprised Snowbird didn't crack the top
Well, so it
three.
depends. I mean, Snowbird and Alta are for, your expert skiers, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's not luxury and,
No, Snowbird is not luxury,
not hardwood.
dude.
So
Whenever my wife doesn't ski, and if we ever go to Snowbird, she's like, "Oh, I can't wait to hang out at the concrete lodge."
I know. But you got to understand, I'm a pansy skier. I like to ski above 35 degrees. I like to ski 4 runs, a glass of champagne. Ski 4 runs. I like to have some
Well, then
chili.
Deer Valley, dude.
You go to Deer Valley, right? Exactly.
You're taking that vernicular or whatever up to the top
funicular,
of that.
right? Up to St. Regis. You've been there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
This is
amazing.
the same guy that called it a Brussels Griffin, people, right?
I know. Jeez, I'm such a redneck. Who know? Like, I live in Tennessee. I play a banjo, apparently. I don't know what to tell you, Scott. Oh, man, this is embarrassing. My roots are getting out there. Okay, last question. Where can people find out more about you? Because there's definitely going to be people that are like, oh, man, I want to geek out some more about Scott's books, his podcast. Where can people go?
Well, that single person can visit me at scottjeffreymiller.com. That is my website. You can Google me. I'll come up. There's lots of Scott Millers, but there's very few Scott Jeffrey Millers. And so you can subscribe to our podcast at FranklinCovey.com and follow me on every social platform, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. I'm everywhere, unfortunately,
Perfect.
my wife says.
That's so funny. Perfect. Well, man, this has been such a pleasure. I knew it would be. I knew as soon as we got talking that we'd have a really fun conversation. I appreciate your practicality, vulnerability. You're holding up one finger.
Stand by, because John Acuff, you heard it here, has agreed to come on Franklin Covey's On Leadership podcast with me, and he's agreed to be featured in HarperCollins Master Mentors Volume 3. I'm going to put you either right before or right after Mel Robbins. I got to decide.
I love it. That is the easiest agreement in the world. 100%. And we'll go ski 4 runs and then we'll stop and ski 4 runs. I am so in. Scott, thank you for doing this. We'll do a quick photo right after this, but I really appreciate it. And if there's anything I can ever do to launch you to more people, you just let me know, because I think your ideas are so great.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, Scott. All right. Thank you so much for listening to my interview with Scott Miller today. We'll put all the links in the show notes as always. And thank you for reviewing my podcast. We're over 1,000 reviews now. That's on iTunes or Apple, or I don't know the name of it. It's just wherever podcasts you listen to. I don't think Spotify does reviews. So if you're on Spotify, you're just enjoying a review-less life. But thank you, everyone who listens on a platform that does reviews. So helpful. I really appreciate it. So please make sure you subscribe or follow or whatever it is the kids are saying these days. And please write a review. Don't forget, visit www.leader.com to set up a custom demo for your team today and discover why more than 600 organizations are already using Leader to track goals and develop their teams. Use promo code Acuff to take 20% off. See you next week. And remember, all it takes is a goal.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast and to get access to today's show notes and exclusive content from John Acuff, visit acuff.me/podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast.